A huge amount has changed since Coronation Street first arrived on television in 1960. Audiences now have access to countless channels, on-demand viewing whenever we miss an episode, and an endless supply of spoilers to dive into. Thanks to streaming platforms, almost everything we could want to watch is instantly available. Because of these shifts, our much-loved soaps have been forced to evolve. However, one development in particular has split viewers, and that is the growing reliance on experimental techniques designed to push limits and move away from the traditional soap format. I've personally wrestled with this topic many times. As a devoted soap viewer, gritty, everyday drama is what I value most. I've always leaned toward character-driven storytelling rather than big stunts, and I still struggle to fully accept the use of special effects within soaps. As these unconventional episodes have appeared more regularly, my opinion has swung back and forth. At times I find them impressive, while at others they feel like a disservice to soap's long-standing history. This has left me wondering why some episodes move me so deeply, while others leave me completely disengaged. A recent Emmerdale episode finally gave me some clarity. Ambitious, rule-breaking special episodes can work brilliantly in soaps, but only when the focus remains firmly on the characters and the storylines. In this week's special Emmerdale installment, viewers followed Cain, gaining access to his inner thoughts through internal narration. We experienced his prostate cancer diagnosis alongside him and stayed with him in the aftermath as he struggled to process the news and eventually opened up to Sarah. The episode affected me far more than I expected, and I already feel it will rank among my favourite episodes of the year. So why did I have such a different reaction when Coronation Street used internal monologues in an episode the year before? Corrie's version of the technique was used during Shona and David Platt's pregnancy storyline. As a whole, it was a deeply emotional plot that captured the fear many parents face when they're told something is wrong with their unborn child. In the opening half of the episode, we followed Shona and listened to her inner voice as the couple attended their hospital appointment. The second half then reset the timeline, replaying the same events again, but this time through David's perspective. Although the idea sounded strong in theory, it failed to fully succeed on screen. Cain's internal monologue strengthened the emotional bond between the character and the audience, but when the same approach was applied to Shona and David, it felt more like a wall than a window into their feelings. A major reason for this emotional distance, in my view, was the way each episode was filmed. Both soaps moved away from their usual visual style in different ways, but these choices allowed Emmerdale to excel, while Coronation Street struggled. In Corrie, the decision was made for Shona and David to break the fourth wall, with each character staring straight into the camera as their inner thoughts were voiced. I can see the reasoning behind this, as it aims to create intimacy between the character and the viewer. Sadly, it didn't have that effect for me. In the opening scene, for instance, we heard Shona's internal thoughts while looking directly into her eyes as her expressions mirrored what she was thinking. Her emotional state was unmistakable, yet I felt completely unmoved. It felt as though, instead of inviting us into her private thoughts, Shona was laying everything out for the audience to see. Rather than simply living her life as she normally would, she appeared to be acting it out. This isn't a criticism of the performances involved, which were strong throughout, but it seemed as though the character herself had been turned inside out, effectively declaring, "These are my feelings." By contrast, Cain carried on with his everyday routine, only to have life-changing news strike unexpectedly and turn everything upside down. With him, we weren't watching from a distance, we were immersed in his mind. It felt as though we became part of his experience, sharing his emotions as our own. Adding to this effect, Cain's face remained the sole point of focus for most of the episode, while other characters were reduced to blurred shapes and recognizable voices. This choice was incredibly powerful, forcing all emotional engagement onto Cain alone and dramatically intensifying the episode's impact. It wasn't until the final moments, after Cain had finally confided in Sarah, that she also came into sharp focus. perfectly timed with her reassurance that he no longer had to face his diagnosis by himself. This creative decision was beautifully handled and left me in tears. We didn't just hear her words, we understood them visually and felt exactly what Cain was feeling. By allowing her into his world, he allowed us in too. By comparison, Shona and David's internal monologues revealed nothing new about either of them. Their thoughts echoed conversations they could easily have shared out loud on any normal day. As a result, the inner dialogue felt unnecessary, existing more as a stylistic experiment than a meaningful storytelling tool. By comparison, Cain has long been portrayed as tough and emotionally closed off, rarely opening up to anyone beyond his closest family. Although he kept that hardened exterior after his diagnosis, his inner voice revealed a much more vulnerable reality. Instead of altering who Cain is at his core, these creative decisions deepened his character and strengthened our connection to him. Cain's episode also gained a huge advantage from the recent scheduling changes introduced across the ITV soaps. 30 minutes felt like the perfect length to remain focused on a single character without losing momentum. When the credits rolled, I found myself sitting with the emotions the episode had stirred long after it ended. Sadly, Shona and David's episode didn't have the same breathing space, as it was immediately followed by another half-hour set on the cobbles, filled with additional characters and storylines. There was no opportunity to properly absorb what we had just seen, and by the time the hour concluded, the experimental first half had almost faded from memory. This isn't to say Coronation Street can't pull off this approach. When the Platt family took center stage during Shona and baby Harper's surgery last month, the episode landed far more powerfully because it placed character and story front and center. Even the surgeon involved was given real depth, sparking conversation among viewers for days afterwards. That installment proved the problem with the earlier special episode wasn't the plot, the characters, or the acting, but simply that style had been allowed to outweigh the core principles of soap storytelling. While I will always have a soft spot for traditional soap, I'm open to producers and directors experimenting and pushing creative boundaries as long as there's a clear purpose behind it. Trouble arises when changes to format and style are made purely for the sake of being different. For me, character and narrative must always take priority, shaping stylistic decisions rather than being shaped by them. As long as the characters and their storylines remain true to themselves, I'm more than happy to see the rulebook torn up, just not every single time. Emmerdale revisits how Caleb knows Graham. Emmerdale reminded viewers tonight of the long-standing connection between Caleb and Graham, as Graham made another dramatic public appearance in the village. He walked into the pub to prove to even more locals that he really is alive, leaving several residents stunned. After returning to home farm earlier this week, Graham had been considering leaving once again, particularly after Joe made it clear he would have preferred Graham to remain dead. However, following some encouragement from Dawn, Joe eventually agreed to give him another chance. Up until now, Joe and Graham hadn't gone out of their way to inform the rest of the village that Graham had faked his death back in 2020. That changed this evening, when Lydia's shocked reaction to seeing him convinced Dawn that it was better to tell everyone at once and get it over with. And that's exactly what happened. Joe and Graham headed to the pub, where their arrival left several familiar faces reeling. Among those present were Sam, Ryan, Billy, Eric, Bob, and Charity, all people who knew Graham when he lived in the village 6 years ago. Sitting behind them were Ruby and Caleb. As relative newcomers to the area, having only arrived a couple of years ago, it would have been easy to assume they had no idea who Graham was. However, that assumption quickly proved to be wrong. Ruby stood up and introduced herself to Graham, making it clear that he already recognized Caleb. While Ruby was keen to understand how the two men knew each other, Caleb didn't have time to explain, as he was due at work. For viewers who may be new to the show, or those who simply need a reminder, here's a look back at how Caleb and Graham are connected. How does Caleb know Graham in Emmerdale? Back in 2023, When Caleb was plotting to take control of Home Farm from Kim, it was revealed that he is the son of Frank Tate. Frank died after suffering a heart attack, and Kim notoriously stood by and watched as it happened. Caleb later became convinced that he was entitled to everything Kim owned, and arrived in the village determined to ruin her life. In June of that year, Caleb finally revealed his true identity to Kim and confirmed that he knew she had allowed Frank to die. When Kim questioned how he could possibly know about something that happened so many years earlier, she was left stunned by his explanation. Caleb revealed that he had deliberately got Graham drunk, allowing him to uncover the truth about Frank's final moments. At the time, Caleb's plan for revenge against Kim unfolded alongside serious cracks in his relationship with Ruby. She remains unaware of his past connection to Graham for now, but could the truth finally come out in the near future? Emmerdale airs on weeknights at 8 p.m. on ITV1 and is also available to stream on ITVX.